The rain started as a gentle patter against the windows of my rented beach house, a soft warning of what was to come. I'd chosen this small coastal town of Seacliff precisely because it was off-season, quiet, and gave me the solitude I desperately needed after the chaos of the past year. My name is Ethan, and at 32, I was starting over. A failed relationship, a career pivot, and the persistent feeling that life had somehow gotten away from me had driven me to this windswept corner of the coast. The weather forecast had mentioned a storm, but I hadn't anticipated anything severe. Just some rain, I thought. Just some time to think. As evening approached, the gentle patter transformed into a persistent drumming, and the wind began to howl around the corners of the house. I watched from my porch as the sky darkened prematurely, heavy clouds rolling in from the sea like an invasion force. The locals moved with purpose, securing boats and shuttering windows. There was an energy in the air that felt both frightening and exhilarating. I decided to head into town for supplies, just in case the power went out. It was during this errand that fate intervened in the most unexpected way. The small grocery store was crowded with locals and the few tourists who, like me, had chosen this odd time of year to visit. As I reached for the last package of batteries on the shelf, another hand reached for them simultaneously. Our fingers brushed, and I looked up to meet the most striking pair of blue eyes I'd ever seen. They belonged to a man about my age, maybe a few years older. Tall, with dark hair that curled slightly where it met his collar, and a face that seemed both kind and guarded. "You take them," he said, his voice deep and resonant even over the chatter of anxious shoppers. "I have some back at my place." "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling strangely reluctant to end this brief interaction. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm Noah," he said, extending his hand. "Ethan," I replied, taking it. His grip was firm, his hand warm despite the chill that had settled over the store as people came and went through the front doors. Our conversation might have ended there, just a brief moment of connection between strangers, if not for the sudden crash that made everyone in the store jump. Outside, the wind had torn a branch from one of the old oak trees lining the main street, sending it crashing through the window of a parked car. The sound was like a starting gun, sending everyone into a frenzy of last-minute purchases. "Looks like it's going to be worse than they said," Noah commented, his eyes now on the scene outside. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind bent the trees at alarming angles. "I'm staying at a beach house about a mile up the coast," I said, suddenly concerned. "Do you think that's safe?" Noah's expression grew serious. "Those places aren't built for storms like this. The forecast just upgraded it to a potential hurricane. You might want to find somewhere more secure." As if to emphasize his point, the lights in the store flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. There were a few nervous laughs, some cursing, and then the emergency lights came on, casting everything in an eerie glow. "I have a cabin about 15 minutes from here," Noah said after a moment. "It's on higher ground, built solid. You're welcome to wait out the storm there if you'd like." Under normal circumstances, I might have politely declined. Going to a stranger's home during a storm seemed like the beginning of a horror movie. But there was something about Noah that put me at ease, something in those blue eyes that spoke of sincerity. Or perhaps it was simply that I didn't want to be alone as the storm raged. "That's incredibly kind of you," I said. "If you're sure it's not an imposition." "Not at all," he replied, and that small smile returned. "Nobody should face a storm like this alone." We paid for our supplies and made a dash for his truck, getting soaked in the mere seconds it took to cross the parking lot. The inside of his vehicle was neat and smelled faintly of pine and something else, something uniquely him. As we drove through the worsening conditions, wipers working frantically against the deluge, I found myself stealing glances at his profile. The strong line of his jaw, the concentration in his eyes as he navigated the increasingly treacherous roads. "So what brings you to Seacliff in the off-season?" he asked, breaking the silence that had settled between us. I considered giving him the simplified version, the one I'd been telling friends and family. But something about the isolation created by the storm, the intimate bubble of his truck as rain pounded the roof, made me opt for honesty. I needed to escape, I admitted. My life in the city was suffocating. A relationship ended badly. I quit my job, and suddenly I didn't recognize myself anymore. I came here to figure out who I am without all the noise. Noah nodded, his eyes never leaving the road. I understand that better than you might think, he said softly. Sometimes you need to strip everything away to find what's real. The road began to climb, winding through dense forest that provided some shelter from the worst of the wind. After a particularly sharp turn, a cabin came into view. It was larger than I'd expected, built of dark wood with a wide porch wrapping around what I could see of it. Despite the storm, it looked welcoming, solid, a refuge from the chaos. We sat like that for a moment, connected by touch and by the sharing of our wounds. Then, as if by mutual agreement, we both reached for our wine glasses, taking refuge in the simple act of drinking. The storm's intensity increased as the evening wore on. We moved from wine to whiskey, from personal histories to lighter topics, favorite books, films, places we'd traveled. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across the room, and outside, the world seemed to be tearing itself apart. Yet inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one made of glances held a beat too long, of casual touches that felt anything but casual. It was during a particularly violent thunderclap that the power finally went out. What happens when the storm ends? I asked, voicing the question that had begun to form in the back of my mind. Noah's fingers traced lazy patterns on my shoulder. That depends, he said thoughtfully, on what we want to happen. I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. In the dim light, his features were softened, his eyes reflecting the occasional flash of lightning from the window. And what do you want to happen? He considered me for a long moment. I want to know you better, he said finally. I want to see if what I'm feeling right now is just the storm, the isolation, the intensity of the moment, or if it's something that could grow in the calm that follows. His honesty was refreshing. No promises, no declarations, just an openness to possibility. I'd like that too, I said, settling back against him. To see what this is in the daylight. We fell asleep like that, entwined. As the storm began to lose some of its fury, the spaces between thunderclaps growing longer, the winds howled diminishing to a moan. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the unfamiliar but welcome weight of Noah's arm across my waist. For a moment, I lay still, taking in the peaceful aftermath of the storm. The air smelled fresh, clean, and birds were singing outside, reclaiming their territory after the tempest. Noah stirred beside me, his eyes opening slowly, focusing on my face. A smile spread across his features, sleepy but genuine. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, suddenly shy in a way I hadn't been the night before. He seemed to sense my uncertainty, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my forehead. "No regrets?" he asked, a vulnerability in his question that touched me. "None," I assured him, and meant it. Whatever this was, whatever it might become, I couldn't bring myself to regret the connection we'd found amidst the chaos of the storm. We got up eventually, moving around each other in a domestic dance that felt surprisingly comfortable for two people who had been strangers just a day before. Noah made coffee while I helped prepare a simple breakfast from the supplies we'd bought. The power was still out, but the gas stove worked fine. After eating, we ventured outside to assess the storm's damage. The world had been transformed overnight. Trees were down, branches scattered across the property, and Noah's truck was partially blocked by a fallen pine. But the cabin itself had weathered the storm intact, a testament to Noah's craftsmanship. We worked together to clear enough debris to free his truck, the physical labor a good counterpoint to the emotional intensity of the night before. As we worked, we talked more, learning the everyday details about each other that hadn't seemed important during our storm-induced confessions. His favorite coffee, black, no sugar, my habit of reading the end of books first, which he found appalling, his love of early morning hikes, my preference for late-night creativity. By midday, the truck was accessible, and we stood together, sweaty and tired but satisfied with our work. The question of what came next hung between us, unspoken but present. "I should probably check on my rental," I said finally, breaking the silence. "Make sure it's still standing." Noah nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "I'll drive you." The journey back to my beach house was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. The town had suffered significant damage, downed power lines, flooded streets, debris everywhere. Emergency crews were already at work, and residents were out assessing the damage, helping neighbors. It was a reminder that life continued, that the bubble we'd been in was just that, a temporary shelter from reality. My rental had survived, though the deck was damaged and a window had broken, allowing rain to soak part of the living room. It was habitable, but barely. You could come back to the cabin, Noah offered as we stood surveying the damage. At least until the power's back on here. I turned to look at him, trying to read his expression. Was this just kindness or something more? Are you sure? I'm sure, he said. And this time there was no mistaking the warmth in his eyes, the invitation that went beyond practical considerations. So I packed a bag, and we returned to his cabin. The power came back on that evening, bringing with it the modern conveniences we'd done without, but somehow not diminishing the intimacy we'd established. We cooked dinner together, opened another bottle of wine, and talked late into the night. His fingers found my thigh again, that now familiar touch that sent the same thrill through me as it had the first time. Days passed, and I didn't return to my rental except to collect more clothes. We fell into a rhythm together, learning each other's habits, preferences, the small quirks that make up a person. We explored the area as it recovered from the storm, helping where we could, discovering hidden beaches and forest trails together. And each night, we discovered more about each other, about the connection that had sparked during the storm but continued to grow in its aftermath. His fingers on my thigh became a signal, a promise, a reminder of how we'd found each other. 2 weeks after the storm, I received a call from the city. The job I'd applied for before my impromptu escape wanted an interview. It was a good opportunity, a chance to restart my career in a direction that excited me. I told Noah that night as we sat on his porch, watching the sunset. His fingers were on my thigh, tracing those patterns that still made my breath catch. "When would you go?" he asked, his voice carefully even. "The interview is next week," I said. "I need to leave in a few days." He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers stilling on my leg. "And after the interview?" It was the question I'd been asking myself since the call. What did I want? The city with its opportunities and energy? Or this place? This man? This unexpected connection? "That depends," I said, echoing his words from that first night. "On what?" he asked, turning to look at me. "On whether you'd want me to come back," I said, taking a risk, putting my heart on the line. His fingers resumed their movement on my thigh, more purposeful now. "I want you to come back," he said simply. "I want to see where this goes, Ethan. I wasn't looking for this, for you, but now that I've found you." I leaned in to kiss him, cutting off his words. "Then I'll come back," I promised against his lips. And I did. After the interview, which went well, I returned to Seacliff, to Noah, to the cabin that was beginning to feel like home. I took the job, which allowed for remote work most of the time, requiring only occasional trips to the city. Months passed, and our relationship deepened, grew roots. We weathered smaller storms together, disagreements, the challenges of combining two lives, the ghosts of our pasts. But through it all, there was a constant. His fingers on my thigh, a touchstone that took us back to that first night, to the connection we'd found as the world raged around us. A year after the storm, Noah took me to the beach where we'd first gone walking together during those early days. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. "Do you remember what you said to me the morning after the storm?" he asked as we stood watching the waves. I thought back. I said a lot of things. "You said you had no regrets," he reminded me, "about what happened between us." I smiled at the memory. "I still don't." He turned to face me fully, taking both my hands in his. "Neither do I. Not a single one." And then he was kneeling in the sand, pulling a small box from his pocket, and my heart was racing as it had during the height of the storm. "Ethan," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. "I never expected you. I never expected us. But you've become everything to me. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a band of polished wood inlaid with silver. Something he had made himself, I realized with a surge of emotion. "Yes," I said, the word catching in my throat. "Yes, Noah." As he slipped the ring onto my finger and stood to kiss me, his hand found my thigh in that familiar gesture that had come to mean so much. And I knew that whatever storms life might bring our way, we would weather them together, finding shelter in each other. Sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that save us, that show us who we really are and who we can be. Noah and I had found each other in the midst of chaos, two souls seeking refuge from their personal storms. And in that refuge, we had discovered something worth building, something that could withstand whatever the weather might bring. His fingers never left my thigh that night as we celebrated our engagement, as we made plans for our future, as we loved each other with the same intensity that had brought us together during that first storm. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had found my home, not in a place, but in a person. Total _char_count, 18,756.